On July 27, 2018, police responded to a call coming from an apartment building on Tufiska Avenue in Moscow, Russia. From the other side, they heard the voice of a young girl under 18 years old who informed them that her father was injured and they urgently needed an ambulance. When officers and paramedics arrived at the scene, they realized the situation was more serious than they had imagined. The 57-year-old man lay on the ground surrounded by a pool of blood. They tried to treat him, but it was too late. He was no longer alive. The man's 3 daughters watched the situation from a corner of the room. The noises from the nearby highway contrasted with the silence of the young women. There was something strange about them. They seemed to be about to reveal something important. She was born in Moldova, but moved to Russia when she was very young with her mother in 1996. They settled in the city of Moscow, where Aurelia met a man named Mikhaila. There was a big age difference between them. She was 17 years old and he was 35. Mikhaila tried to win over Aurelia, but the young woman's mother forbade them to go out together. However, they found a way to see each other secretly after 3 years. The woman gave them permission to marry, but by then, the relationship was already problematic. Mikhail constantly hit Aurelia, even when she became pregnant with her first child, so for the child's sake, she preferred not to separate. Over time, the couple had 3 more daughters, Christina, Angelina, and Maria, who had an age difference of only 1 year. Although they looked like a typical family from the outside, inside things were very different. Mikhail constantly humiliated Aurelia and demanded that she take care of all the household chores. If she didn't do things the way he wanted, he would hit her. The man never showed any willingness to change his character. After the beatings, he asked Aurelia to make him tea as if nothing had happened. The woman even filed a complaint of gender violence with the police, but it was unsuccessful. He considered leaving home, but in reality, he had no financial independence. Mikhail had forbidden him to work and only gave him a sum of money that was barely enough to buy food for the children, while he was extremely stingy with his family. In front of his friends and other family members, he was kind and gave them ostentatious gifts, creating great scenes. He was so generous with those close to him that he offered his mother, sister, and nephew to come live in the house. Instead of defending Aurelia, the new concubine supported the regime to which her husband subjected her and even justified physical violence. As the years went by, Mikhail became addicted to sleeping pills, which made his mood swings even worse. Bored of his wife, he looked for a new person in whom to deposit all his evil. He wanted Sergei to become his spitting image, but the young man was nothing like him. He was noble and respectful, and constantly defended his mother from beatings. The relationship became so strained that when Sergei finished high school, Mikhail kicked him out of the house. The young man lived for a few months with his maternal grandmother, then with his uncles, and finally with his friends. Since his father did not leave him any money, he could not enter university and began to work every day. Meanwhile, things in the KHACHATURYAN home only got worse, and Mikhail also began hitting the girls, who were around 10 years old at the time. Sergei tried to visit them on several occasions, but his father showed more and more resistance. Finally, the young man lost all contact with the family in 2015. Mikhail did exactly the same thing with Aurelia that he had done with his son. He told her that he no longer needed her and that he wanted her to leave home. The woman tried to take her daughters, who at that time were 14, 15, and 16 years old, but the despicable man forbade her. I needed someone to take care of the housework. Since then, the 3 girls had to dedicate a large part of their lives to cleaning the house and cooking for all the people who lived there. Mikhail repeated the same pattern with Aurelia. If something didn't turn out the way he wanted, he would beat them badly. The situation became even more sinister when the man installed a bell in his room. If he made it ring, one of the girls had to come immediately to bring him whatever he wanted. These requests occurred at all hours of the day. They had practically become his slaves. The man's demands became more and more terrifying. On one occasion, he asked them to groom his dog and then forced them to eat the animal's hair while he watched. When any of the young women refused to comply with any of his eccentric requests, Mikhail threatened them with weapons. The only moment of freedom they had was when their father went on a trip. They took the opportunity to go out with their friends, take photos together, and upload them to their Instagram accounts. Although they had cell phones, they were being monitored by Mikhail, who had prohibited them from trying to communicate with their mother. Therefore, he controlled all the messages they sent. The situation worsened when the infamous man began to sexually abuse Christina and Angela. Due to a prostate disease, he asked them to give him massages, claiming that this would cure him. At first, he did it separately and threatened them so they wouldn't tell the other. During a vacation at Sushi, Mikhail forced Christina to go to a hotel room with him. Once there, he forced her to have sex, but she refused, and he hit her very hard. This event left the young woman completely traumatized, to the point that she attempted to take her own life. Although the firefighters managed to save her and took her to the hospital, days later she was discharged, and Michaela received her with a severe beating. As the months passed, the man confessed that he also abused Angelina. He did it with an extremely sinister purpose. He wanted them to do it in a group. The young women refused, but he threatened to kill Maria if they did not do so. As the situation at home worsened, acquaintances increasingly began to notice the change in the girls. Mikhail told them to skip school so the teachers wouldn't notice their bruises. However, his absence became increasingly evident. On one occasion, Christina had to take a mathematics exam to be able to enter a major economics university. She was an excellent student, and the teacher had high expectations for her. But when the day came, Michael ordered him to stay at home cooking. This completely baffled the school authorities. They reviewed the absence history of her and her sisters and noticed that they had submitted dozens of medical permits, which seemed extremely strange to them. They also noticed that the girls were acting more and more withdrawn and had lost their attention span. Worried, they decided to call social services to request a visit to the KHACHATURYAN home. However, that never happened. As the months passed, the young women stopped attending school and spent all day locked in their home. They could only see what was happening in the outside world through the window. At that time, they were 17, 18, and 19 years old, and did everything they could to endure their father's humiliations. However, one day his patience reached the limit. On July 27, 2018, Mikhail returned home after receiving medical treatment at the Solovayo Neuropsychiatric Hospital in Moscow. He alleged that the house was not as clean as he wanted and that the girls had incurred some additional expenses in his absence. Completely enraged, he took his 3 daughters one by one to the room and sprayed them in the face with pepper spray. Asthmatic Christina, therefore, fainted after the attack. Seeing the state in which the ill-fated man had left their sister, Angelina and Maria made a decision. They would no longer endure their father's abuse. They waited until he fell asleep on the living room couch, grabbed a hammer and a knife from home, and approached him stealthily. Angelina hit Mikhail in the skull with the hammer, who woke up and began screaming for help. Hearing the noises, Christina got up and ran to meet her sisters. She took the pepper spray that the man had used to attack them and met her father on the stairs of the apartment, where she sprayed him in the face. Once he was unconscious, Maria stabbed him 35 times in the chest, taking his life. Next, they used the same knife to cut some parts of their bodies. They wanted to leave injuries that would show that he had also attacked them. Angelina then called the police emergency line and told them that her father was injured and needed a paramedic. The agents were present at the house located on Tufiska Avenue. They went up to the apartment where the family lived and saw Mikhail's body lying on the hallway floor surrounded by blood. They noticed that he had multiple stab wounds and cuts on his chest and neck, and they declared him dead at that very moment. The agents then proceeded to search the house and discovered a large quantity of weapons, including a knife, a hammer, a crossbow, a rifle, and 2 air pistols. They also found 16 bullets, 16 darts, and a considerable sum of cash. Following this discovery, the detectives suspected that Mikhail was involved in suspicious activities. However, they did not suspect the girls even for a second. For their part, the young women were sure that they had acted in self-defense and did not hesitate to confess the truth. They admitted to having taken their father's life, but with the motive of escaping the physical, mental, and intimate abuse to which he had subjected them. They even expressed that they preferred to be behind bars rather than continue living with that monster. The agents decided to interview neighbors to corroborate this story. They all described Mikhail as an extremely strange man and reported that every afternoon he would arrive at the building and honk his horn. Furthermore, the three young women came down and surrounded him to accompany him to the apartment as if they were his bodyguards. They had also heard many screams coming from the house, but they preferred not to intervene. Although the girls' statement made it clear that they had acted in self-defense, the authorities were not entirely convinced. On July 29th, they were charged with murder without aggravating circumstances and transferred to a detention center. However, during the investigations, agents discovered that Mikhail had installed cameras in the house to monitor his daughters while he was away. This finding added to the young women's testimony about the abuse they suffered. The news generated great interest and empathy on the part of Russian society, and a team of lawyers took the case completely free of charge. With a legal team accompanying them, the three young women underwent physical and psychological examinations. These showed that Angelina had wounds in her intimate area due to the abuse to which she had been subjected. Christina had scars all over her body that also proved the abuse by her father, and both suffered from post-traumatic stress. Maria, for her part, did not have physical injuries, but she did have psychological ones. The doctors recommended that she be declared unchargeable and transferred to the psychiatric ward of the Batirka prison. A group of domestic violence experts testified in their favor, stating that, in the absence of adequate protection mechanisms within the police and the judicial system, the young women's only option was to defend themselves, since if they had not done so, their father would have ended up murdering them. Finally, the murder was classified as a hostile reaction due to the prolonged moral suffering to which they had been subjected. The physical and psychological abuse had been proven with all the evidence in its favor. The sisters' lawyers argued that the murder was in self-defense, mentioning that the Russian penal code allowed self-defense not only in cases of immediate aggression, but also in cases of continuous crime with a kidnapping situation where the victim is being tortured. However, prosecutors insisted that the incident had been premeditated, since Michaela was asleep and the sisters coordinated the attack. They claimed that the motive had been revenge. This generated a strong reaction throughout society, and dozens of human rights activists came out to defend them, arguing that the sisters were not criminals, but victims, since they had not obtained any type of protection while growing up. This was because in Russia there were no laws protecting victims of domestic violence. The case generated a debate in society, and calls began to change the law and to implement measures such as state-funded shelters, restraining orders, and courses to manage the aggressive behavior of abusers. In Moscow, St. Petersburg, and other big cities, protesters took to the streets to call for the release of Maria, Angelina, and Christina. Celebrities such as actresses and YouTubers joined. Although the Russian media gave various versions of what happened, they all agreed that the young women suffered beatings and abuse from their father for a long time. A petition was held requesting that the crime charge be changed to self-defense, which received more than 300,000 signatures. At the same time, women's rights activists stated that the sisters should receive psychological rehabilitation instead of a prison sentence, and demanded that Michael be tried posthumously for his terrible acts. Although most people were on the side of the KHACHATURYAN sisters, some people took a stand on the opposite side. An association called Men's State, which defended patriarchy and nationalism, organized a campaign called Murderers Behind Bars, insisting that the sisters should not be released. More than 150,000 people, including Mikhail's mother and sister, came out to speak to the media, stating that they should be considered the main witnesses since they lived in the house at the time of the crime. They stated that they had never witnessed the man behave violently towards their daughters. The girls' cousin, Arsène, even accused them of lying about the beatings to defame their father. However, the medical examination said otherwise. In mid-August 2018, the investigation confirmed that Mikhail had psychologically and intimately abused his daughters. The KHACHATURYANs were released, but several restrictions were imposed on them. They could not speak to journalists or each other and were prohibited from carrying out certain activities, such as using the internet and communicating with family members who were going to testify on their behalf at trial. On June 14, 2019, the charge was changed to murder committed by a group of people after a premeditated conspiracy, with a sentence of between 8 and 20 years in prison for the two oldest and 10 for the youngest. However, on July 11th, the investigation committee posthumously accused Mikhail of torture and violent acts. In August 2020, the case reached the Moscow City Court, where a motion by Christina and Angelina's lawyers to have the crime heard by a jury was accepted. Maria was declared unfit to stand trial, and prosecutors were expected to request a separate trial for her due to her medical condition. On December 4th of that same year, the Vasmani court in Moscow declared the refusal to initiate a criminal case against Mikhail illegal. Although the trial remains open and the sisters continue to await their sentencing, the defense hopes that this fact will lead to the charges against them being dropped. The sisters' case could lay the foundation not only for the generation of laws that protect women in court, but also to provide protection while they suffer violence at home, thus avoiding these terrible events. Well, I hope you enjoyed the video. Leave me your opinion in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and activate the notification bell so you don't miss our next videos.